All right, everyone, I said months ago, really, Joe Biden's approval began inching down fairly steadily from the first week that he was the asterisk president of the United States, honk honk. This is partially because a lot of that bump in approval really was just the result of poll rigging, cherry picking, or flawed methodology. Now, never assume malevolence when sheer ignorance can explain the phenomenon. Some of these polling firms, the problem, and they've had it before, it's not that they're partisan, it's that their methodology adjusts the polling sample based on the prior election and the perception of turnout. So if you have, supposedly, honk honk, considerably higher than normal Dem turnout, of course 81 million votes, most votes of anyone in history, 10 scoops of ice cream, the polls are therefore adjusted, and you end up with like a plus 10 Dem skew in some of these polls. Even in those polls, Joe Biden has a mediocre approval somewhere in the 50 to 52 range, and his disapproval has risen by 9 points in 6 months. If it continues that trajectory, and considering we're about to get more hyperinflation due to his shovel-ready 2.0 infrastructure deal, which a bunch of rhino-cons have now signed off on, so you're really close to having the votes to get it through the reconciliation process, trust me. He'll be able to tout out, Mitt Romney voted for my bill, and Lisa Murkowski, the most loved senators in the United States, ha ha ha. So we're about to spend trillions of dollars on projects that won't work. They will not give you a return. If anything, they'll just straggle on with more and more debt. You're about to see higher unemployment, probably. You still see attacks on the energy sector. The border crisis is still there, although it's out of sight, out of mind. The Legacymedia no longer talks about it. You've got the Delta variant bringing a new wave of COVID cases. Doesn't concern me. At this point, most people are like, fuck it, and I've got a mask mandate video to make later as a new tech exclusive for a reason. That being said, you've got a compounding of issues that have significantly lowered Joe Biden's approval. I believe it was already underwater on day one of his presidency. Not for a second do I believe the polling skew that I initially saw. I don't believe the polling skew now. I think the only one that's tolerably close to reality is Rasmussen, and that shows him closer to 50-50 with his disapproval in the high 40s. This would be sensible, given the partisan makeup of the country and given the direction things are going. It seems to me that if citizen optimism is down 20 points, and business confidence is lower, and inflation is higher, and unemployment ticks up, and the pandemic comes roaring back into the news cycle, it would be impossible for Joe Biden to have, as the Hill-Harris poll suggests, high 50s approval. By structure, it's probably impossible for any president to hit 60, no matter what they do. If Joe Biden today were to manage to withdraw from all foreign theaters, there's no war going on, all of a sudden unemployment drops to 3%. Inflation goes into reverse. People are making more money. Wages shoot up. Everything's going hunky-dory. Biden there are doves flying around him at all the time, and he's no longer demented. He suddenly becomes a wordsmith. He's as good as Theodore Roosevelt or something. Even under those circumstances, it'd be difficult to get far into the 60s. Simply because of partisan politics playing such a role, and racial politics as well to an extent. I don't believe the numbers at all. But even in the Legacymedia, link in the description archived of course, they're realizing that the honeymoon is over, so to speak. They're realizing, even if they're looking at cherry-picked polls, they can still see the trajectory. The problem with the sampling methodology, the push polling with missed samples, both deliberately and not deliberately, the problem is that while you can hide the real number, you can't hide the direction the number is going in. We can create a trend line for Joe Biden's disapproval. It's up 9 points since day one of his presidency. That point is probably close to true. It's just that the ultimate numbers that you're seeing in that trend line are probably skewed by a few points. I think his disapproval is already near 50-50. I think there's a lot of the country that doesn't have any strong feelings. I think his disapproval in reality is higher than his approval, but there is also an element of just boringness through his presidency. It's like Trump was more polarizing because he'd say crazy shit on Twitter. But with him, not in the office anymore, we've got a boring dude who avoids going out in public whenever possible and certainly avoids questions from both press and civilian alike when he does. it's just not as much of a lightning rod for good or for bad. I think that he prefers to be the boring president as opposed to trying to be the good president that unifies people. Any unity message has gone out the window, by the way. I think this will continue. You're seeing that only 6 months in, and the heir apparent to all liberalism, the greatest guy ever, the most votes, 10,000 scoops of chocolate ice cream, he's protected by a 24/7 wall of propaganda. He's protected by universal acclaim from the Legacymedia. He's protected by censorship from big tech. He's protected by a billion bureaus that have all been politicized, and he's still managing to lose considerable sums of support. Think of what would happen if he got the same kind of coverage Trump got. He'd be in the 30s right now. He'd be in the shitter. He'd be close to being forced to resign by his cabinet right now if he were subjected to the same kind of journalistic scrutiny Trump was. Because we would have gotten unnamed sources. CNN would have a story today. Unnamed sources in the White House say that Joe Biden fell down again and had a big stinky caca mess in his pants. Sources say, yeah, Joe Biden really does pinch a little girl's nipples. By the way, I'm not even going to touch that story because I think that releasing the DMs of people without their permission is sleazy. We already know that Joe Biden is a creep, okay? No amount of proof is going to sway anyone who's not been swayed by the hundreds of photos and pieces of video we have. It's dumbassery. It's a losing proposition to bother going after him on the creepazoid front. Everyone either knows it or has cognitive dissonance and refuses to acknowledge it. But Joe Biden, can you imagine? MSNBC headline, unnamed source says that Joe Biden was chasing his dog again and kicked its ass. He's a puppy kicker. Unnamed source says that Joe Biden secretly has COVID, and he's doped up to the eyeballs on medicines that you can't even mention on YouTube, and that's the only reason he's semi-sane right now. You know, you'd have a slew of this, and it would be 24/7. The news cycle with Trump never ended. It's like night and day. Now it's like it's boring. So you have to scrape the bottom of the barrel most days. Then you could count on Hillary Clinton whines about losing. Trump said something on Twitter. It's obviously problematic. The Democrats running around like chickens with their heads cut off, but now they're bogged down in this bipartisan infrastructure goop, this crapola, where they're going to fuck the economy. Yeah, by the way, when the inflation gets worse, is Biden's approval going to drop accordingly? Yeah, if it hits 7-8%, don't worry, everyone, it's just transitory. Don't worry about it too much. It'd be funny seeing them continue to circle the wagons. But the wagon, the oxen that are drawing those wagons are starting to get a little bit tired. At some point, it's going to be kind of hard to continue. That's about all. Peace out.